Welcome to CoramBAAF Conversations, a podcast series dedicated to adoption, fostering and kinship care. We ask children's social care professionals and experts by experience to join us to share with us and you, our listeners, their experiences, reflections and knowledge. I hope you enjoy.
So welcome to the Adoption and Fostering Journal podcast. This is an introduction to the March 2025 issue, which is Vol.49 Issue 1, out now. And my name is Vicky Walker. I'm the production editor of the journal, and I'm here with Dennis Golm, who's the editor-in-chief.
Hello, everyone.
So as usual, what we'll do is we'll have a chat about the editorial, ask Dennis to talk about his editorial sort of briefly for us, and then we'll run through the contents of the issue just to kind of give this outline of what's included in this edition. So there's a real focus on diversity in this edition. A few of the papers kind of deal with these kind of topics and issues, and diversity is obviously the key theme of your editorial this time.
Yes, so in this editorial, I was able to feature not one but two articles from the current issue, which is very nice, because they're both, in one way or the other, dealt with issues of diversity. So the first one was a scoping review by Rachel Stemp and colleagues, and they kind of asked the questions about how diverse is research within foster care, and they basically looked at the demographics that were reported in research studies on foster care, and what they found was basically there was a lot of variation between studies, and some characteristics were more commonly reported than others, but I think the message was that there should be more standardized reporting and more demographics should be reported on. One issue, for instance, they identified is that usually there was no distinction between sex and gender, for instance, in the included populations, I think, and also things like age and ethnicity. They were only reported by a third of the studies, for instance, I had identified, which is not a loss. And sex and gender, sex or gender were reported the most, but also they were not reported in almost 40% of the studies.
And in these studies, they're not necessarily even acknowledging that they're not collecting this information, are they? They're not necessarily even acknowledging that it's a limitation. So there's generally a lack of awareness of the need to collect and include this kind of information in research that's published.
Probably, and they are making a suggestion for a template to use at the end.
Yeah.
So that could be a solution to the problems. And then other things that are also not as often reported on include disability, and that, as if planned, brings us to Peter Unwin's study. Obviously, here we're talking about foster care representativeness within research studies.
Yes.
But it means if these things are not reported, or if some groups are underreported, then there are voices within research that are not heard. And that is obviously a problem. So ideally, foster care research should be representative of the demographics of the foster care population as a whole.
Absolutely, because then there can be meaningful kind of messages that go out to policy and practice if the research is reflecting kind of accurately what's going on in the actual population. It makes more sense and has more meaning, doesn't it, for policy and practice?
And then the article by Peter Unwin and colleagues also focuses on the topic of in that case, disability within foster care.
Yeah.
Not foster care research, but kind of a foster care population within England. And
obviously, there are huge recruitment and retention issues that we're well aware of in among foster carers at the moment. I mean, obviously, we're aware of it in the work that we do, but it's in the news. There's a real awareness of this. I think that we've got this problem in the country at the moment, and one of the suggestions that comes out of Peter Unwin and his colleagues' article is that this could be a really valuable way of kind of looking at increasing inclusivity and diversity could help be one way to address that problem of recruitment and retention, couldn't it? Because we're not there's a whole sector of the population that we're perhaps excluding or not reaching properly when it comes to the agencies recruiting.
Yes, because there is a recruitment problem with foster carers, and it's also an aging foster carer population. So something needs to happen in order to increase the number of foster carers again.
Yeah.
And I think the solution that Peter Unwin and colleagues are suggesting is to make a conscious effort to recruit disabled foster carers. But they already had done another study where they looked at how well the opportunity to become a foster carer for disabled people is mentioned on websites. And they found that it's not mentioned at all most of the time.
Yeah.
So that is one problem.
And there's been more of a focus on disability among the children who need to be careful, rather than carers kind of as a sector looking at increasing diversity and inclusion. The emphasis has been in one direction, but maybe not the other.
Yes, exactly. And I think what they tried to do is they recruited basically across different foster care agencies and conducted a questionnaire first, or a survey, where they asked about awareness about the Equality Act and knowledge about it, and discovered that there was basically a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
But also I think their recruitment was hard for them, and engaging kind of foster care agency into this research was hard in the first place, which I think is interesting on its own.
Yes, yeah. Because they had a dropout, didn't they, of one of the, first of all, getting people involved, and then of the 4, I think, agencies that were involved, one of them dropped out because new management came in. So yeah, there's questions there, aren't there, about whether there's discrimination going on.
Yeah, and how much they value this type of research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And then they kind of conducted a training within the agencies and did a follow-up survey, and they analysed it qualitatively. They had, fortunately, to deal with a bit of a dropout of participants at that stage, but the kind of findings that they have suggest an improvement in knowledge and also things like empathy. So that is promising. But I think the bigger message here is that this could be a solution to a problem, and it's something that there's no active engagement of foster care agencies, basically to recruit disabled foster carers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that at the end of the article, I think it's a really useful sort of set of recommendations for policy and practice, and some kind of, as I say, recommendations for implementing, for trying to kind of improve things, for trying to actually get agencies to address this and to kind of think more actively about how they can recruit disabled people, which comes from being more inclusive in marketing materials and things like that, doesn't it? So it's just like the entire approach, really, as well as kind of how they support people. It's kind of right from the beginning, and as we say, recruitment stages as well.
And I think it also comes with maybe stereotypes or reservations that some social workers have, or agencies have. And I think one of the articles, maybe previous journal article that might be helpful there, is the article by Tim Kane on the BRACE model, which is a model with a set of very useful questions that agencies or personnel agencies can ask themselves. It was developed for recruiting kind of prospective adopters from ethnic minorities, and it's just to help overcome own personal bias. But I think similarly, these questions could be helpful in maybe overcoming some stereotypes held against disabled people. Or just asking, where does this assumption come from, and do I actually have evidence for that?
Yes, yeah, completely.
And also we might record another podcast. We might have Peter Unwin and one of the other authors, Becky Meakin, with us for a podcast episode. So
Yes.
they will tell you all about disability in foster care.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one to listen to. So yes, watch this space for that one, or listen up. So I suppose we better hop along into the rest of the issue. So Sandra, Melander, and colleagues, we've got quite a few Scandinavian articles in this issue. So this one is Sweden, and it's a group intervention that was developed in Australia, then adapted for use in Sweden, and then I think adapted a little bit by the authors of this study again, who kind of looking at birth mothers with intellectual and developmental disabilities of sort of what we think mainly autism and ADHD. I think in this case it was 3 mothers, wasn't it?
Yes, multiple case study.
And all of these mothers, these women, their children who had just gone into care, kind of either with them willingly or otherwise. And the intervention was about supporting these women to kind of come to terms with their loss and also realign their kind of role as a mother and get some group support. So they interviewed them at 3 time points, including, I think it's just over a year, wasn't it, after the intervention and the group was kind of run. And I saw that there were some real longer lasting benefits for these mothers. It's kind of along the theme of diversity again, isn't it? This one, kind of how we can be as inclusive and supportive.
I guess it shines a light on a population that is, or whose voices are not often heard in research, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because birth parents and kind of the subgroups of birth parents with intellectual and developmental disability. So that's a very nice thing, I think, about this study.
Yes, 2 sort of underrepresented groups and kind of the overlapping kind of groups there.
Yeah, there's a real theme in this issue for some reason.
What's that, sorry?
There's a real theme in this issue.
Yeah, there is. It's interesting how these things do tend to kind of collect together. I would say we heavily planned it, but obviously we have open submissions, so things kind of come in different ways. So the next article is Lisa Coe and colleagues, looking at foster carers holding the experiences of the children in their care. And I think this is a really moving piece. Again, we've got lots of quotes in it with interviews with the foster carers and how they've experienced the managing really the trauma, managing their own lives alongside the lives of the children that they're looking after. And this sort of team of we've had another article about kind of professional and kind of parenting, sort of like that. The dualities really of the role of being a foster carer and the 2 sides that both need to be equally respected. So it's really looking at that, how the whole system needs to kind of be a system of support and holding. And as I say, I found it very, very moving to read actually these experiences of foster carers. It's an IPA. Remind me, this is an interpretive phenomenological analysis. So you tend to get slightly sort of smaller studies on that than some, so that it's
it is a method that can be very well applied to kind of smaller samples to get a very rich picture.
Yes, yeah. With more details, in-depth interviews that you can get with people.
And in-depth kind of data analysis as well.
Yeah.
And this is foster carers, so we have kind of birth parents, we have foster carers represented.
Yeah.
And then we also have a study on social work professionals.
Yeah, so I'm kind of moving through all the different, it's a really holistic look at the care system in a sense, isn't it? This issue of all different sort of aspects of it. So yes, Evelina Friedel lived again, Sweden. This next article on independent fostering agencies, and as Dennis says, how these social work professionals, so including managers, administrators, and social workers, experiencing engaging with independent fostering agencies or IFAs. So although it's set in Sweden, it's very important and relevant to the UK, because this is a very large proportion of recruitment happens through the IFAs in the UK. She's looking really at how they feel about it, how these professionals feel about using IFAs, and when and in what sort of situations they would be used. So, for example, in cases of really complex needs, it can be useful to kind of get that wider pool of recruitment. I think there's related issues that come out in terms of pay as well, or I'm not kind of massively familiar with the Swedish system, but how the IFAs are able to recruit certain people that maybe the municipal or local authority agencies kind of can't. Whether there is a sort of, as she questions in the title, some kind of organisational failure there that means that there's a need to outsource and look kind of externally. So
it's a way of outsourcing, right? So because there aren't enough kind of available foster carers within the Swedish equivalent of the local authority, right? And then they are outsourcing, and then they are looking at kind of reasons for that, but also reservations people hold. And I think we have similar problems in the UK, where a local authority does not have enough foster carers, and then they're using private foster care agencies as well. Sorry, not necessarily saying that is a problem, but we have the similar things are happening here.
Exactly,
so
yes.
It's interesting to learn about this from a Swedish perspective, and comparing it kind of with the situation in the UK.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's it. So very relevant, even though there's a different context and relevant questions that come out of it.
In some way, maybe plays again into the Peter Unwin's article, where he mentions we have a decline in foster care and foster carer recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Issues.
It comes back to issues of recruitment, totally, doesn't it? And the kind of this system that we have in the UK at the moment, shining a bit of a light on that. On England. So then the last article is Ellie Maria Camula. I think these final two are both based on dissertation projects. I think I'm right in saying that. So we've got some earlier career authors, which is always nice to see. So this last one looks at the agency paths of young adults. So 18 young adults, I think age 18 to 32 years old, kind of reflecting on growing up and how they'd managed to exercise agency in different ways. So possibly kind of a way of understanding how to support those with care experience or those in care to exercise agency and have some influence in their lives.
And we're staying in Northern Europe with this one. So this one is not Sweden, but this is Finland.
Finland, yes.
So I feel like it's a Eurovision in a way.
Yeah.
We have Sweden, we have Finland, we have
It's so true. So true. And it's all about inclusion and diversity and celebrating the difference.
And this one this one focuses on young adults with a foster care background. So again, a different population. So while we have a bit of a focus maybe on foster care in this issue, we have kind of young adults with foster care experience represented, and then we have an article about birth mothers who lost a child to care and who also have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and then we have social workers features, and they talk about foster care and independent foster care agencies, and then we have the question around kind of diversity within foster care research and kind of recruitment or lack of recruitment of disabled foster carers. So kind of the articles fit very nicely together in a way.
They do, they really do. So then a quick kind of mention to the legal notes in the issue. We've got legal notes on Northern Ireland and Scotland, and some really fascinating recent cases, including kind of surrogacy and missing the deadline to register the birth, and the courts having to kind of come in there. I suppose to kind of wrap up, another interesting one in Scotland is the woman who was compensated an awful lot of money for not being properly supported or giving full information about a child with complex needs who she adopted. So it kind of loops us back round, I think, that piece into issues around the information that's given and expectation setting and the support that we offer when there are very complex needs. So yes, unfortunately, that was about a breakdown of adoption, but you kind of question whether that could have been prevented.
Well, we feel our legal notes are quite. I mean, I'm a psychologist, so I know nothing about legal notes, and I find it so fascinating to read them. And I always feel like I learned something along the way. So they are short and sweet and well worth read.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be here again, won't we? Next issue.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of CoramBAAF Conversations. If you'd like to know more or listen to earlier episodes, visit corambaaf.org.uk.